You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear 2 teachers, Andrew and Katie, discussing the coming excursion of their language class. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Well, we have this school excursion plan, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
The excursion is on Wednesday, so Wednesday has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, we have this school excursion plan, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
And where are we going?
Last month we went to Arthur Island, so this time we're going to the animal park.
Arthur Island was okay, but it was too cold. Let's hope the weather for this week's excursion is better. I don't suppose animals care about bad weather, but I certainly do. Have you heard the forecast?
Yes, and it's not too bad. Basically, they're saying Monday will be sunny.
Good.
But then the weather will change.
Not so good.
Yes. Tuesday we'll have some showers, but by Wednesday, the day of our excursion, it will be, well, their words are cold and cloudy.
Cold and cloudy. Well, as long as it isn't wet and rainy, I'm happy enough. We won't need umbrellas, just warm clothing. And what time will we get there?
Let's see, the bus picks us up at 8:30 a.m. and then it's an hour and a half on the road, so we arrive at 10 a.m. Sorry, with the 15-minute break, that will actually be 10:15 a.m.
That's early enough. Then all our students can see the animals, have their fun, and do whatever they want to do.
Well, one fun event planned that day is Birds of Prey.
What's that?
That's when they bring out several birds of prey, eagles, falcons, kites, those sorts of birds, and throw pieces of meat into the air, and the birds swoop down and eat them. It's quite impressive.
Sounds great. Birds of prey. Are there any other activities?
There's a catered lunch at the park restaurant. We've already paid for that. And in the afternoon there's... Well, I had a choice between the reptile display and the koala handling. In the reptile display, the students can handle live pythons and various other snakes.
Surely they'd rather hold koalas.
I'm sure, but the koalas can't be handled unless the weather's sunny, and given the forecast, I thought it better to choose the reptile display.
That's a shame. These Asian students would love the koala handling.
Yes, I know, but we can't control the weather.
And then we get back. What time will that be?
We leave the park at 4:30, but then we face traffic, so we won't get back until well after 6 p.m. It will most likely be 6:30, but that's better than the last trip. We didn't get home until 8:30 that time.
Yes, that was a bit too late, wasn't it?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Andrew, I understand you've been doing some research regarding the breakdown by nationality of our student body. That must have produced some interesting results.
You're right. I got some statistics from head office.
I would imagine that most of our students are either Japanese or Chinese.
You imagine right. But it's the Chinese who constitute the majority, but only just. I had thought Koreans might be second, but it's actually the Japanese, quite close behind. It's somewhat surprising, but obviously all those study tours that our university markets in Japan are bringing in students.
What's the breakdown exactly?
Japanese are a quarter of the whole, which is considerable. Last year they were only 16%, so that market has grown nicely. The only other proportions of some weight are the Indonesians and Koreans, about the same. Indonesians at 15% and the Koreans are a little higher, not like last year when they were less than 10%.
I thought we'd have more Indonesians than Koreans.
Well, as I said, they're about the same. Just like the Saudi and Thai student numbers, almost the same also, both just under 10.
Which one is bigger?
Thai students number just a fraction more. As for the other nationalities, collectively they're only 3%, so it wasn't worth giving each of them a separate category. I just grouped them under other. That's Vietnamese, South American, a couple of Russians, and so on.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a university administrator telling a group of new students about the central campus buildings and the facilities they provide. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Welcome everyone to the Brandon Complex, the geographical and we could say spiritual heart of this university. This is basically where everyone eats too, as you can see by looking around. There are many different cuisines here, Chinese, Indian and Middle Eastern, plus the usual fare of a local type, all in that corner over there. We have many shops here too, but the biggest is Wilson's right there, providing clothing and hardware. That's next to all the restaurants. Now, on the opposite side of Wilson's we have 3 shops. The one in the corner there, closest to the restaurants, is for DVDs. Yes, the DVDs are cheap and affordable, and you can also rent DVD players as well. Moving on. In the corner directly opposite Wilson's is the Student Union office. Incidentally, you are all encouraged to join the Student Union, as a Student Union card gives you many benefits, including discounts on basically everything you can buy here at the Brandon Complex. Outside this complex, on the other side of the road, you can just see it from here in fact, is a building that we call by the rather unusual name, the H Building. Next to this, on the other side of some trees along the main road, is the Engineering Institute, but that doesn't have anything to do with the Brandon Complex. One last thing is that just outside this door, near us here, you can see a grassy oval patch. Well, that's the playing field for what we simply call the fitness room, which is alongside. So you can put on some calories here at the restaurants and then burn them off at the fitness room afterwards. Oh, I forgot to mention this shop right here, in the middle, beside the Student Union. It's the bookshop. And as you can see, it's always busy, always popular. You can buy newspapers, magazines and stationery there, plus a few clothing items as well, just as you can at Wilson's. Why don't you go and take a look right now?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now, I'd like to tell you a bit more about one of the buildings here, namely the H building. Despite its bland name, you might be interested in what goes on there. It is our main recreational centre, with halls, offices and space available for a variety of activities, mostly for those who want to get fit. For example, if you're interested in yoga, you're in luck, since 4 days a week there are free yoga classes. They have several levels, so if you're a beginner, you'd have to start with that. You can check the schedules on the wall there. Yoga used to be at night, but now it's in the mornings, but not on Wednesdays. Along those same lines, there's aerobic dancing in the afternoon. This shares the same room as the badminton games, which are on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. The aerobics are on the alternate days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it's not restricted at all. Everyone is welcome to join, although the instructor may divide you up, of course, according to ability. And, just to show how diverse the H building is, there's even some spiritual solace available there inside the multi-denominational prayer centre, with individual booths and a variety of holy scriptures and texts available to read from all the major religions of the world. That's open all day over the weekend, but not at night time when the rooms are for private booking. Finally, for those of you of a cerebral nature, the University Chess Club operates at night. That's open from 8 p.m. every, is it Wednesday or Monday? No, sorry, Friday. And I think it closes at about 11:30 p.m. So, there's something for everyone in the H building.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You are going to hear a lecture about the world's energy. Listen carefully and write no more than 3 words to fill in the blank in the following summary. First, you have some time to read the questions. Now, listen to the lecture.
The world's energy comes from a number of different sources, which may be broadly classified into 2 categories. The first, which includes fossil fuels and minerals such as oil, coal, natural gas, uranium, etc., comprises sources of energy that are non-renewable. The second category, which includes the wind, the waves, the tides, the temperature of the oceans, and the sun, comprises sources that will continue to provide energy in virtually unlimited quantities as long as the Earth and the Sun exist. And yet, despite the fact that they are to all intents and purposes inexhaustible, the sources of this second category remain almost untapped. Most energy is produced today by burning hydrocarbon fuels drawn from the world's non-renewable reserves. The amount of these potential reserves, by which is generally meant the quantity that can be extracted by present or conceivable future techniques, is a matter of some controversy. This is understandable. If we consider the enormous difficulties involved in determining how much fuel nature has hidden in the earth and how much of it is or will become accessible, and the fact that different countries use different methods of estimation. Proven recoverable reserves, i.e., those whose extraction is already an economically feasible proposition, are considerably smaller. The great difference between potential and proven recoverable reserves is explained by the fact nature has placed so much of this fossil fuel in remote parts of the globe, at depths and in quantities that makes its extraction unjustifiable at present in economic terms. Let us now compare proven recoverable reserves with estimated consumption. Between now and the year 2010, the quantity of energy required by the world will account for almost 10% of its proven recoverable fossil fuels. If no other source of energy is employed, 78% of these fuels will have been used up by the year 2050, while 100 years later, according to the most moderate long-term forecast, there will be none left. Comparison of consumption with potential reserves produces a somewhat brighter picture. By the year 2010, the demand for energy will have used up only 3.6% of these reserves, and by 2050, 26%. A century later, about half of these reserves will still remain. These comparisons clearly show that the world's stock of chemical fuels is quite sufficient to cover its energy requirements for at least another 100 years. There is thus no immediate danger of, as it were, emptying the coal bucket. On the other hand, these reserves of fuel are limited, and within the foreseeable future there could be none left. It is possible that our children's grandchildren might find themselves in a world drained dry of natural gas and oil. We should thus lose no time in thinking about ways and means of producing artificial oil or artificial gas, and above all, of producing energy in unlimited quantities from sources which in no way threaten the environment.
Now turn to section 4 of your listening question booklet. Section 4. You will hear a lecture about project management being given by a university lecturer. First, look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
I'd like to begin today with a quick review of last week's lecture. We saw the definition of project management as something which has a clear beginning and a clear completion date with goals, a budget, and a schedule. We saw its presence in the private and public sectors in many different industries. You'll also remember that we outlined the life cycle, as it were, of a project, and looked at the first of a 4-stage cycle, establishing the limits of the project. Today we're going to talk broadly about the second stage of project management, developing a plan for the project. Next week we'll focus on the implementation of the project, and then the final stage, its evaluation. Let's get started on today's topic though, planning the project. The success of a project will depend on the skills and care which you put in at this initial planning stage. Planning is not only necessary in terms of budget or cost, it's also crucial that you consider the time frame of a project and the standards which you'll be expected to provide. These three elements are, of course, integrated. Project planning is best conducted as a team. You might have to take responsibility for handing over the final plan, but without a team behind you, you'll find it almost impossible to plan effectively. We'll discuss budgetary planning firstly, because that is, of course, what you are most likely to be evaluated on by your own manager. Before drawing up a budget, you'll need to understand the time frame involved to carry out the work and the standard of delivery at which the labor and materials are to be supplied. Now, this is arguably the most difficult to plan for. You'll never plan completely accurately for a project in terms of money, but you will become better at planning realistically. And it is this part of the planning process that you will do last. The best way to plan the cost of a project is to consider all the factors involved and how those factors relate to time and standard of delivery. Write these down on a spreadsheet format and begin the task of costing and estimating. The company that you're employed by will always have their own systems in place for doing this. They will also indicate the kind of profit they are looking for, usually in percentage terms. The second stage of planning is the allocation of time to a project, and for this you'll have to canvass others for help. Only by asking the advice and opinions of those with expertise in the field will you be able to establish the size of each unit of work to be completed and the order in which those units of work should be carried out. Remember that some units of work may be done simultaneously, but many cannot. In your tutorials this week, you'll be introduced to the Gantt chart. That's G-A-N-T. This method of planning project activities has been very successful in the field of project management. The complete set of tasks involved in a project are identified and then planned in relation to each other. You'll soon discover that organizing and prioritizing activities is quite an art form. The third part of your planning, as I said, will affect your money and time considerations, and that is the standard of delivery that the project demands. These standards will be outlined in the tender documents, if they've been your guide or the master plan from which you're working. Always make sure that for every unit of work that is to be completed, you'll have to write specifications. They are detailed descriptions outlining specific standards of quality in materials and labor. If these specifications are not carefully written and then complied with, the project is unlikely to be successful. These specifications will be referred to many times once the project is underway. You will also have to deal with a quality assurance manager at this stage, who will advise you on the standards which need to be met. Quality management has become a valued component in successful project management companies. I've provided you with an outline of the planning process for project management, but you'll be looking at these three elements in more depth in your tutorials this week.
That is the end of section 4 and the end of the listening test. You now have half a minute to check your answers.